They said the world had moved on. Emails replaced envelopes. Screens replaced handwriting. People stopped waiting for the sound of footsteps outside their door, stopped listening for the soft knock followed by the words, "Dak a gay hai." The mail has arrived, but every morning, before the sun even touched the rooftops, old Kareem woke up the same way he had for 47 years. No alarm clock, no phone, just the habit of a man whose life was stitched together by routine, duty, and a promise no one else remembered. He sat on the edge of his wooden bed, rubbed his tired knees, and stared at the shoes lying near the door, the same pair he had been repairing over and over for years. The soles were thin, the laces mismatched, the leather cracked, but they still had one more day in them. Kareem always believed in one more day. He filled his kettle, made his simple cup of tea, and then, with slow, careful hands, lifted the brown leather mailbag that had once been bright and new. It was older than some of the children in the village now. Some even believed the bag carried stories older than themselves. At 6:10 a.m. sharp, he stepped outside. The winter air bit into his skin. The silence was the kind of silence that only exists in small, forgotten places. The village children often saw him and shouted, "Baba Post! Baba Post! Kisko letter leho?" He always smiled, waved, and replied softly, "Yiska hisahoga usikeo maliga." Whoever it belongs to will receive it, but they didn't know the truth. Most of the letters he delivered had stopped being answered years ago. He still delivered a birthday card every March to a woman who no longer lived in the village. He still delivered a letter from a son in Dubai to the house where only broken windows and dust remained. He still carried a bank notice to a farmer who had passed away 2 winters ago. Why? Because his job was never just to deliver paper. He delivered time, memories, pieces of life that people had forgotten. Some people had died. Some had moved away. Some had simply forgotten the promises they once wrote in ink, promises like, "I'll come back, I'll never forget you, I'll write every week." But Kareem didn't stop, because there was one letter in his bag that never aged, never returned, never spoken of, a sealed envelope, yellow, unclaimed, carried for almost 3 decades. And every time he touched it, he whispered to himself, one day, it will reach him. That letter was the reason Kareem still walked the 14-mile road. That letter was the reason he never retired. That letter, written by a mother who cried while handing it to him, was the only thing left in this world that still needed him. He didn't walk for money. He didn't walk for the government job he technically no longer had. He walked because a promise was heavier than a bag of letters. And until that promise was fulfilled, Kareem would keep walking the road no one else walked anymore. In Kareem's old leather mailbag, there is one envelope that never gets mixed with the rest. It is the oldest letter he has ever carried. The paper is yellow now. The seal is still unbroken. No stamp. No date. No address to return to. Just one handwritten line on the front. For my son, when he's ready. For 27 years, Kareem has been searching for that boy, not because he was paid to, not because it was written in some official duty book, but because on the day he received that letter, a mother placed it in his hands with shaking fingers and tears rolling down her face. She didn't beg him. She didn't explain. She didn't say why. She only said one sentence, a sentence that stayed with him longer than time. He will need this one day. And Kareem, a man of very few words, made a promise without speaking. I will deliver this. Even if the world forgets him, I won't. That day, something changed in him. A normal postman delivers what is given. Kareem delivered what was meant, but people didn't understand. They laughed at him, called him stubborn, old-fashioned, lost in a world that had already moved on. Some said, why keep a dead letter alive? Others said, why walk miles for a ghost? But they didn't know what Kareem knew. Some letters are not written for today. Some are written for the moment a heart is ready. And that letter, that small, yellow, quietly waiting envelope, was not a message. It was a bridge. A final piece of love from a mother to a future she would never see. Every year, the village changed. People left. Names faded. Houses emptied. New technology arrived. Phones, emails, notifications, typing. But inside Kareem's bag, one thing never updated, never expired, never got replaced. The letter with no name. And every time he touched it, he felt it wasn't a delivery. It was a duty, a trust, a weight placed on his heart by someone who had no one else left. There were days he wondered if the boy was even alive. Days he wondered if the letter was already too late. But still he walked, because a promise is not kept by convenience. It is kept by continuing. No matter how long it takes, no matter how far the road goes, no matter who stops believing. Kareem didn't stop because somewhere in the world, a son was still missing. The one thing he didn't know was waiting for him. A final message. A final goodbye. A final piece of love that hadn't found its way home. Yet, he delivered time, memories, pieces of life that people had forgotten. Some people had died. Some had moved away. Some had simply forgotten the promises they once wrote in ink. Promises like, I'll come back, I'll never forget you, I'll write every week. But Kareem didn't stop, because there was one letter in his bag that never aged, never returned, never spoken of. A sealed envelope, yellow, unclaimed, carried for almost 3 decades. And every time he touched it, he whispered to himself, one day, it will reach him. That letter was the reason Kareem still walked the 14-mile road. That letter was the reason he never retired. That letter, written by a mother who cried while handing it to him, was the only thing left in this world that still needed him. He didn't walk for money. He didn't walk for the government job he technically no longer had. He walked because a promise was heavier than a bag of letters. And until that promise was fulfilled, Kareem would keep walking the road no one else walked anymore. The day the world finally tried to stop him was the day everything changed. The winter storm came without warning. Snow covered the old road like a white grave. The wind howled, sharp enough to cut through skin. And for the first time in 45 years, Kareem's steps were not steady. His foot slipped. The ice cracked beneath him. He fell hard. His leather bag burst open. Letters, memories, promises, all scattered into the snow like birds trying to fly with broken wings. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't listen. And there, alone on the frozen road, Kareem whispered the words he never thought he'd say. Maybe. It's time to stop. The world around him was silent. No footsteps. No voices. No one waiting for him anymore. But then, a sound. Fast footsteps on ice. A voice calling out through the storm. Wait. Sir, please don't go. A young man came running, breathless, shivering, holding something in his hand. The yellow envelope. The one with no return address. The one Kareem carried for 27 years. The one that had never been opened. The young man's voice cracked. This letter is mine. My mother wrote it. I've been trying to find you. Kareem's frozen hands began to tremble. His eyes filled, not from the cold, but from disbelief. He had spent half his life searching for the sun, and the sun had found him. And in that moment, broken on the road, Kareem realized he had never been walking alone. He delivered time, memories, pieces of life that people had forgotten. Some people had died. Some had moved away. Some had simply forgotten the promises they once wrote in ink. Promises like, I'll come back, I'll never forget you, I'll write every week. But Kareem didn't stop, because there was one letter in his bag that never aged, never returned, never spoken of, a sealed envelope, yellow, unclaimed, carried for almost 3 decades, and every time he touched it, he whispered to himself, one day, it will reach him. That letter was the reason Kareem still walked the 14-mile road. That letter was the reason he never retired. That letter, written by a mother who cried while handing it to him, was the only thing left in this world that still needed him. He didn't walk for money. He didn't walk for the government job he technically no longer had. He walked because a promise was heavier than a bag of letters. And until that promise was fulfilled, Kareem would keep walking the road no one else walked anymore. The final letter, the final road, the final promise. The boy held the envelope with shaking hands. Kareem stood beside him, silent, as if time itself was waiting. He broke the seal gently. The paper was fragile, almost as old as his childhood. Inside, just one page, written in a mother's fading handwriting. The boy read it aloud, voice cracking between breaths. If you're reading this, it means you lived. And that is all a mother ever wanted. No instructions, no apology, just love written a sentence that survived 27 years of distance, storms, and silence. The boy didn't try to hide his tears. He wasn't ashamed, and Kareem. He didn't speak. He just closed his eyes and smiled because a promise had finally reached the heart it was made for. That winter, Kareem delivered his last letter, not because he was tired, not because the world had changed, but because the letter that kept him walking had finally reached home. There was no celebration, no interview, no headline that said, the last postman completed his mission. The world kept scrolling, kept forgetting, kept moving faster than paper and ink could follow. But somewhere, in one small house, a son held the last words of a mother. Because one man refused to let love get lost in time, Kareem hung his empty bag by the door and sat quietly by his window. Outside, the mailbox stood in the snow, like a monument to a world that once believed in waiting. And for the first time in 45 years, there was nothing more to deliver. Yet somehow, the silence didn't feel empty, because when a promise is kept, it doesn't need to be remembered by many. Just by the ones who mattered.